Kari Lake went before Congress, specifically the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Uh, they were holding a hearing called Spies, Lies, and Mismanagement, examining the U.S. Agency for Global Media's downfall. So, she went there and testified, and you need to hear this because she is pointing out the facts and the truth when it comes to the fact that the voice of America has become the voice of China. That's right. We have been spouting pro Chinese propaganda on our tax dollars. That's the problem that we've got in this country. We have been allowing folks that are Marxist to, and I don't understand it because the Marxists that I keep hearing about keep complaining about Maoism, but they keep supporting Maoism. And that's what's been going on with the Voice of America. In other words, with our tax dollars. So let's let you hear what she has to say in this House hearing.
Howdy, y'all. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. What we have here is a channel to communicate. I want you folks to be thinking by the time you leave my videos. Why? Because I'm tired of people talking via what other people tell them to think. So, watch my video and enjoy the chance to think for yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee, Ms. Lake. I chair the Congressional Executive Commission on China. We've had many, many hearings. We've worked on legislation. One of my bills that passed just a few weeks ago was to combat the heinous practice of forced organ harvesting, where 50, 70,000 young people, average age 28, get their organs taken. They're Uyghurs, they're Falun Gong practitioners. It passed 406 to 1, second time it passed last year as well. I've had 4 hearings on it. Xi Jinping is committing atrocities like almost no one else in the world. And whether it be what he's done to Hong Kong, the pervasive use of torture, religious persecution, everywhere you look, genocide against the Uyghurs. And then in your testimony, and I would ask you if you could maybe elaborate on this, you point out that the past leadership of VOA, Mandarin Language Services, conducted annual meetings with the Chinese embassy in Washington. Well, I go to the Chinese embassy myself, outside picketing. We try to meet. I've invited Chinese leaders here from the embassy and from the government many times to testify. Every time they turn us down. But if you could elaborate on those meetings, whatever you could tell us. You also pointed out that VOA's Mandarin language service personalities have hosted events at the Chinese embassy. And one of VOA's television editors even publicly pledged his allegiance to the PRC at a Chinese embassy event. And finally, you said VOA allowed the communist Vietnamese and Chinese embassies in D.C. to pressure them into removing videos, cutting short live interviews, or changing story angles so that coverage was more supportive of the Chinese governments of Hanoi and Beijing. If you could elaborate on that, I'd deeply appreciate it.
I'd be happy to, and I just actually read an article that was very interesting. It's called Chinese Influence at Voice of America. And I mentioned that there's a firewall, an editorial firewall, that members of the management at USAGM and Voice of America cannot tell the reporters what to report. They can't talk about what should be in the newscast. And so if a reporter decides to go rogue and do pro-CCP coverage, I can't do anything about it. That's not how a newsroom should be run. I've worked in newsrooms my whole life. There's always some editorial control that management has so that you're making sure that what goes out of the airway is accurate. And frankly, in an agency such as this, it should be telling America's story. That's our charter, telling America's story, being authoritative, not telling China's story. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what you just mentioned. If I may read this, because it was really shocking when I read this. And sorry, I got to put my reading glasses on for this one, guys. Starting in the first decade of the 2000s, the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., and the leadership of VOA's Mandarin service began an annual meeting to allow embassy officials to voice their opinions about VOA's content. So management at USAGM has no say in what content it goes on, but the folks over at the CCP and the Chinese embassy do have say about what goes on our air. CCP embassy officials have also reached out to VOA hosts to convince them to be more supportive of the regime. VOA personalities have hosted events at the embassy. VOA TV editor, one of them, publicly pledged his allegiance to China at a Chinese embassy event. This is absurd. This is insane. And the American taxpayers are footing the bill for this. You know, they also ran a 2-minute CCP propaganda. They produced it at VOA. And the management agreed that it was CCP propaganda. Frankly, 2 seconds of CCP propaganda is too much. The American people are footing the bill. And so things have to change there. We need to make sure that firewall is gone. We should be able to have control over what kind of content goes out. It should be in alignment with our foreign policy. And unfortunately, the only people that seem to have any influence are our adversaries on what is going out on VOA's airwaves. It's outrageous and it has to stop. And thankfully, President Trump issued that executive order to bring this agency down to its statutory minimum. And he has called for this agency to be eliminated starting in the fiscal year 2026.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for highlighting that important complicity with the brutality of the Chinese Communist Party. You know, I'm barred from going to China. I used to lead human rights missions there frequently. The Global Times put me on their so-called hit list. And I can tell you, you know, I can't go to China, and yet we had people collaborating with their top leadership here in D.C. and elsewhere. And that is outrageous. We need to reform this, and I agree.
You can judge a man by his enemies, and you've got good enemies.
Thank you very much. Yield back.
Real quick, if you don't mind, hit like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. So, you heard what Kari Lake had to say. And you might be going, well, what does she know? Because I've already heard the liberal arguments on this. Why? Because you hear the same thing over and over again, just different names attached to the arguments. But here's where the truth of it is. Our tax dollars have been spent to create a Soviet-style utopia. Now, it's been failing because conservatives have been fighting it, but our propaganda machines, NPR, Voice of America, all of these different media organizations that we fund spout some of the weirdest stuff when it comes to the fact of, I believe in freedom. I know a lot of people that believe in freedom, but when you listen to NPR and all this, these other liberal propaganda machines, they're spouting, hey, you need to bow down to your government overlords. And that's what people that I know that deal, you know, I know folks from over in the Asian area, and they've listened to Voice of America over there. And several of them have made the comments that it's nothing in the world but telling you to bow down. Well, I'm sorry, this dumb redneck doesn't think about that we should be bowing down to any government overlord. And it's about time we quit funding it. But tell me what you think. Seriously, you need to pay attention. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Y'all have a good day now. Bye. So, folks, that's the story that I wanted to bring you on this video. And I just wanted to say thank you again for coming by. Hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff if you don't mind. Help me out. So, y'all have a good day now. Bye.